Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some PathOfExile discussion. When I posted some thoughts on the Balance Manifesto and then had a look at what other people were saying, I was really surprised that people were claiming that there were no buffs in the manifesto. I want to go through a number of skills that have been buffed by this manifesto and also a build archetype. So let's start by quickly answering the question some of you probably have, which is when a build guide's coming. And the answer is basically 1 or 2 days before league start. There's nothing that can be done now. So the first one I want to call out is Soulrend. This skill was already sort of okay. People weren't playing it very much because other things were better, but it was solid. It was capable of defeating the Feared, including in 3.15, which was probably the time that the Feared was the hardest to beat. It's getting a 23.5% raw numbers buff, and the skill might also gain a bit from the changes to the Trickster. Now, this is a skill that is definitely likely to be played on Occultists, whether the Trickster gets buffed or not. If you are playing it as an Occultist especially, you've got access to Bane and presumably 3 curses with it. And in that situation, you want to go Temporal Chains, Despair, and Punishment. That against weaker enemies, you'll just clear them with Soulrend. Against medium strength enemies, you'll throw Bane in first, then you will drop Soulrend on them. And against tougher enemies, you will go Bane first, then you'll spam Soulrend at them for a period of time whilst dodging their attacks. Temporal Chains increases the duration of Soulrend and therefore increases its damage. Despair increases the damage per second of the skill. And Punishment is interesting on the Occultist. When you get a Corpse Explosion, there'll be a lot of overkill if there's surrounding enemies that are also killed, and that will then cause reflected damage, so Punishment ends up being really good there as well. You could possibly do this as Chaos Inoculation, possibly as Life with Divine Flesh. This is all to be determined. Plus, of course, there is the Celestial Cat Soulrend microtransaction that is available in the PathOfExile store, which is pretty popular for the meme value. Next is Haste. Haste is something that I think a lot of people are sleeping on. I ran a bit of a poll over on my YouTube channel and I asked people how much you think the new version of Haste is going to be used, how good do you think it's going to be? And I think a lot of people thought it was going to be sort of B tier, around Malevolence power. I think it's actually quite a bit better than that. 40% aura effect, you're looking at 21% move speed and 33% attack and cast speed. If you can get 60% aura effect, you're looking 24 and 38%. You probably will be getting a bunch of aura clusters on the classic passive tree and potentially also on cluster jewels in 3.19 because whilst auras have been nerfed a little, they have not been gutted. So for comparison, the Raider often spends 2 ascendancy points to get 23% move speed, 23% attack and cast speed. That's from the Onslaught wing, either the first 2 nodes or the second 2 nodes. So I think that should give a sense that running the Haste aura is at least competitive with a 2-point ascendancy node. This is a strong aura. Note that swapping a different aura for Haste can make your mana tight, and attack builds cope with this better than spell builds do. That's because a lot of the things that attack builds use to manage mana, such as flat cost reductions from Replica Conqueror's Efficiency or Warlord Body Armor, or Mana Leech and things like that, they actually do scale up as you're attacking faster, whereas most of the things that spellcasters use for mana do not scale up very well with increased cast speed. Now, I do think that this is now the best softcore leveling aura. If you've got the dexterity to run Haste, you're just going to run it, and it's going to make you get through the axe faster, even if you do get through them with 1 or 2 more deaths. Hit-based melee is the next one we want to talk about. So this is a general character archetype, and this is something that was missing something very important, and that was that Fortify was in a terrible spot for the last couple of leagues. The real problem in 3.18 was that melee at builds could not endure the medium-sized hits, stuff like Toxic Volatiles reliably, and so they spent too much time dodging relative to attacking. The solution here is that Fortify gets better. Now, melee builds can reliably endure those hits. They're going to still hurt, but you're going to be able to leech through them, and so you can endure those small and medium hits and then still dodge the big telegraphed attacks that are much rarer. A lot of people raise concerns for melee about damage rejection. I don't think this really is that much of a case anymore, and that's been because of the +2 strikes mod getting much more common, and also a number of melee skills getting baked in plus range. Yes, even that +2 range on cleave. This sort of thing ends up making a fairly big deal because it means that you can hit a much larger section of the screen with each of your attacks, and therefore you're hitting more of the screen than you think. You can often run around one-tapping packs just fine with a melee build now. This wasn't true in the past. There was a whole period where melee builds were in an absolutely terrible spot where they weren't one-tapping. Now, this really is only true for strikes and for a couple of individual skills that have got very large areas. However, ailment melee, I think, is in a very bad spot. Do not start bleed, lacerate, or something like that. And the reason for that is that you don't get much in the way of leech, and also you don't get much in the way of fortify. Really think that the changes that were made to deadly affliction support should probably be reworked here, because at the moment they are making it so that you can't leech or fortify on those builds. Unless, of course, you forego that support gem, but that support gem is one of the things that your damage is balanced around, and therefore it ends up being a really, really messy situation. Sunder in particular, while we're talking about hit-based melee, gets everything that general melee gets. It also gets 18% damage from the patch notes, and most importantly, actually, more so than the damage, it gets 60% wave propagation speed. The skills damage wasn't awful, it was the damage projection that's being fixed. Lastly, we've got Explosive Trap. This is not actually getting buffed, it's more that its competition is getting nerfed and it is not getting nerfed. So at the moment, people don't play Explosive Trap because Seismic Trap is just a bit better. But it's only just a bit better. If Seismic Trap had been nerfed on its own in 3.18, I think everyone would be complaining about how Explosive Trap is now dominating the meta. Explosive Trap has a few specific things going for it. Firstly, once you level a gem up, it gets more radius and it also hits more secondary explosions. This means that it gets better at projecting damage over a larger area. It's still not A tier damage projection or anything like it, but it's not nearly as bad as people think based upon the experience of using it at very low level. Additionally, it just does so much damage. Now, this is a skill that people often think of, oh, it's a trap, it's got to be used on a saboteur. That can actually be wrong. It can be fine on an Inquisitor as well. And who knows, maybe you'll find some other ascendancy that you can make it work on. Anyways, that's all I got on that. May your Val Orbs have interesting results, and I will see you around.